Welcome back, everybody, on this trade deadline Friday, and some notable additions at the trade deadline. As we talked about in the previous segment, Nazem Kadri back to Colorado. You've got Justin Falk reinforcing that blue line in Detroit. John Carlson going to Anaheim. Bobby McMahon leaving Toronto, going to the Seattle Kraken, just to name a few. And it's been an interesting day, to say the least. And we have two very busy gentlemen joining us now here on NHL Now. We got Elliotte Friedman and Frank Seravalli. You guys have been amazing throughout the course of the week leading up to this, and of course today as well. So kudos on a job well done. Elliotte, I'm going to start with you. We just showed a couple of the big names, but I'm curious to get your biggest surprise when this day has now come and gone. Like, what was your biggest surprise of the day?
Oh, there's no question on my mind, Catherine. It was Kadri, because yesterday, before the Avalanche traded for Nick Waugh from Toronto, they'd gone down the road with Kadri. The package that went to Toronto for Waugh was discussed with the Flames. They had agreed, I believe, on a retention percentage. They had the framework of a deal, and I don't know what happened. It didn't get over the finish line. It wasn't like Emmett Smith at the goal line. When it got to the 2, it was always a touchdown. They got stuffed there too many times, and it just didn't work. And I know yesterday there were a lot of hard feelings. There were a lot of disappointment, and Kadri was disappointed. And I give everybody involved credit here to be able to come back and say, all right, we're going to get this done. And I think the Flames did Kadri a real favor. I think he wanted to go back to Colorado, and the two sides made it work. So that would be mine.
All right, Frank, I'll ask you the same question. Your biggest surprise after the day is over with?
Well, I'm going to go back to the overnight hours. It feels like 3 days ago now at this point. But John Carlson going to the Ducks, to say that a UFA from a non-playoff team gets traded somewhere else in the overnight hours before deadline day, okay, maybe not that much of a shock, but the timing, how it unfolded, how little talk there seemed to be out there about John Carlson leading up to it. Yes, this is a franchise icon, and yes, contract extension negotiations these two sides hadn't seen eye to eye, but to think that, he's sleeping and finds out when he wakes up in the morning that his new life is starting over out west after being in Washington for 17 seasons and holding just about every franchise record for defensemen, it's still a little bit shocking now, nearly a day later. So that's the one that stands out for me. And I think, it's going to be interesting to see where Washington goes next after picking up the pieces.
Frank, we heard yesterday a little bit about maybe Corey Perry staying or trying to extend. Was there something, was it Julien BriseBois maybe just calling Kenny Holland and they bringing it to Corey Perry? Hey, Tampa might want you back. Is that something you want to do? I mean, I understand what that phone call would mean. I wanted that phone call to happen to me right when I left Tampa. I loved playing in Tampa. Is there something like where the Lightning are or whatever was on the table, Corey Perry wanted to stay and stick it out, et cetera? How did that whole thing evolve and change?
Yeah, Brian, so there was a material change in the last day. And so the Kings and Corey Perry had ongoing discussions about, do you want to be traded? Do you want to stay? And he said, look, I'd prefer to stay. That's my goal. But at the same time, he was seeking a contract extension to remain in LA. And the Kings at this point in time, based on where they're feeling playoff-wise and in the race, plus looking forward to the future, they weren't ready at this exact juncture in time to commit to Corey Perry for next season as a 41-year-old. Understandable. But in that case, at the same exact time, John Cooper is actually the one, not Julien BriseBois, who's pounding his fist on the table saying, I want Corey Perry back. Let's find a way to get this guy back. And so without the commitment from the Kings to keep him with an extension, and he's thinking, well, if I'm moving at some point, I might as well take another run at a Stanley Cup, and to do it in a place where he is familiar, of course, in Tampa, obviously too much to bypass. So in this case, Corey Perry moving back to Tampa, and a pretty decent return at that for the LA Kings, getting a second-round pick back.
Elliotte, I wanted to ask you a question. Just, I don't want to say there's a lack of movement today, but there were some big names out there that didn't end up moving, some teams who I thought were clear sellers who didn't maybe sell off as much as we had thought. How much did the new rules of the CBA affect that in terms of no double retention, the LTIR rule for playoffs, even the cap going up where teams are now able to retain their pending free agents? Do you have a sense of any of that played a factor in maybe guys not moving as that we thought were clearly going to move?
You know, Corey, I think of all those things, I think the double retention played the biggest deal, because if you wanted to do double retention this year, you had to have the first trade done by early December. And it's just, I really do think, and I'll freely admit it, I hate the league for doing this. I think it's not good for all of us who like this stuff. But I think that was one of the biggest factors. The playoff new LTIR, yeah, I think teams were concerned about it, but the double retention was bigger. Honestly, Corey, I think the biggest thing is the no trade clauses, and I don't complain about that. If you negotiate a deal and two sides sign a deal, fair is fair. You live up to your deal. But I do think sometime down the road, and maybe it's the next CBA, I expect teams and the league to try to see if they can come up with a way to limit them. I don't know if it'll work, but I hear a lot of complaining about that. However, right now, Corey, fair is fair. If you sign a deal, and there's guys like Kelly Rudy, he's a total hardliner. He feels that if you have a no trade clause, you shouldn't even be allowed to ask to waive it. But I think that's the biggest factor.
Interesting. Elliot, sticking with you just real quickly about, the no trades that Corey was alluding to. I mean, Vinny Trocheck's name was around and spinning rumors for the last week and a half, 10 days, really since he got back from the Olympics. So we heard so much about his name, and he ends up staying pat in New York. So what was, around that situation, what essentially made Chris Drury decide he's keeping this guy?
I think it's pretty simple. Like, a lot of the West teams were out. Vincent Trocheck came out and admitted himself that the West Coast or the far West was not something he was willing to do, and he blocked it. I do think Minnesota tried. Bill Guerin had a good quote today about he thought he was going to have an Olympic gold medal discount because him, Chris Drury, and Vincent Trocheck won one together. He said it didn't happen. I just heard, honestly, that the price was very high. And like with Panarin, the Rangers were boxed into the corner, right? And they're not boxed into the corner with Trocheck because they still have him under contract for 3 more years. I think the Rangers felt that it had to be a high bar, and I'm not much of a high jumper, Catherine. I couldn't clear it, and nobody else did either.
Frank, I have one for you here. I just think, for me, I had to see Detroit do something. I really think that, for me, I had to see it. Maybe Dylan Larkin had to see it. I know Steve Yzerman, he was just going to do what he thought was best, but I mean, how important was it to even the big Justin Falk trade? That's huge for them, I think, but just the fact that they made a deal for a name guy.
Well, yeah, it's not just making a deal. You're bringing in a real quality player in Justin Falk, whose season this year I think has been a little bit under the radar because the Blues have struggled. The fact that he also has another year left on his deal at a really manageable number, and for the Detroit Red Wings, who I think have struggled at times with some of their defense acquisitions over the last few years, Falk feels like a guy who really puts them in and sets them in the right direction. So significant move. And by the way, should be commended, the St. Louis Blues, after the Colton Parayko deal fell apart, the Blues still end up moving on from Captain Braden Shen and Justin Falk on this day, and they end up with 2 first-round picks, 2 third-round picks, and a couple of prospects to go along with it. So as much as this deadline for St. Louis went in fits and starts, they end up with a pretty significant return to set a new course for their team. And the Red Wings now, after also adding David Perron, who's working his way back from his hernia surgery, are going to be in a much better position moving forward.
Elliot, I got to ask about the goalies, obviously. It's just what I do. No goalie movement. I mean, I know there weren't a ton of options out there. We had Binnington's name, Bobrovsky's name. Do you think the ask was too high? Because I can think of a few teams off the top of my head, Montreal, even Carolina, teams like Edmonton again, that could have used an upgrade in net. I personally think there's a lack of quality goaltending throughout the league. So is this an effect of teams hanging on to their goalies because they don't know how to replace them? Or was the asking price just too high in certain cases?
Well, Corey, the position's never been the same since you retired. I think we'd all agree on that.
Wasn't trying to say that, but.
No, I knew where you were going. You threw me a belt-high fastball, okay? I just had to hit it. I think this, Bobrovsky, I have to admit, he's, I really love him as a goalie. I love watching him practice. I think he's a Hall of Famer. He's a bit of a mystery to me. And I have to admit, Corey, I don't have a great handle on everything that went here. And I had one team tell me that they were wondering, they didn't want to trade for him and then not be able to keep him and stuff like that. Like, I just think I know there's some people who think he's going to end up signing back with the Panthers for a couple of years. And one team did kind of indicate they weren't crazy about the idea of him as a rental. I think the thing about Binnington is, and they had him out there. One team said to me that no matter how rough the season in St. Louis has been, Binnington has now proven 2 years in a row that you put him behind a good team, he just focuses on stopping the puck. I just think the price was too high. I think at the end of the day, I think they just decided that it wasn't going to work, or teams that were after him weren't going to be able to make it work, or the price was too high. I'd love to know if Vegas went down the path with this, but I'm not sure I'll ever find out an answer.
Another team, Vegas. I forgot about them. Yeah. So there was suitors out there, but.
I'd love to ask you, Elliot, real quickly, too, before we let you guys go, just, the situation in Boston. I know a lot of people thought I thought maybe Robert Thomas, but maybe that was wishful thinking. But specifically, Robert Thomas doesn't move. And also the Bruins appear to not do too much. They're kind of in that wild card position. We've seen this a lot with Don Sweeney and his philosophy of, what he chooses to do, doesn't like the rental players. But, where was Boston ultimately in this trade deadline approach, leading up to it? And, what was their approach in this?
I think they looked at Trocheck. I do. I think Boston looked at Trocheck and ultimately decided the price was too high to pay. So, as Sweeney said the other day in his media conference, they've taken a lot of big swings. When you're Tampa and you're there every year, or you're Colorado and you're there every year, or Dallas, you keep taking the big swings. You can tell he feels that there has to be some conservatism now. And I'm pretty sure they took a run at Trocheck and just said, no, we're not ready to pay this price.
Well, Elliot, I have one more for you, and this probably won't be a bell-tie fastball. Buffalo and St. Louis. Leakgate. Who's leaking all these trades that didn't end up happening? Do you know? They're going back and forth, and they're covering their own bases.
I'll say this, and I bet Frank would agree with me. I don't like guessing sources. Honestly, Brian, I'll tell you, and I told this story today. After the Uyghur thing, I was driving. I left work Wednesday night. I was driving to go meet my wife somewhere, and I got a call from someone in the league who I really like. And he said, I answered the phone and said hello, and he said, you're going to listen to me yell at you for 10 minutes. And I said, okay. And he did. And he just said, I don't like this. I don't like that the Parayko thing got out like that. I don't like that the Uyghur thing got out like that. Frank, I think Jason Dickinson had to waive too, right, before it got out. So, I think guys were like, this is ridiculous. And I know today it was close with Shan. I think he'd agreed verbally by the time everybody kind of found out that trade was going to happen. I'll say this. I can only speak for myself. I know people think teams are leaking this to put pressure on players. Mine was the Uyghur one, and I could say that did not happen. I think it wasn't like that. But I will say this. People were really mad about it, Brian. Like I said, I took a 10-minute yell call from someone, and normally I don't let very many people talk to me like that. So it was just kind of one of those days.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those weeks, actually, Elliot, because you're not only getting yelled at on some ends, but then you spend a lot of Saturday and Sunday sending out apologies as well for bugging people. That's kind of the nature of the beast. But you're right in terms of the idea of let's not speculate on sources. I think that's probably a difficult road to go down. And you mentioned with Brayden Schenn, I think he got to the point now today where this is the second trade deadline in a row that the St. Louis Blues had asked him to waive his no-trade clause. And at some point, with a lot of these no-trade clauses, if you ask a player enough times, you kind of get the sense that maybe you're not a fit or aren't wanted there anymore. And so that part really kind of stood out as this trade was getting put together with a couple of the other ones that, this information's out there and it's moving fast. And I'll tell you another thing. This information is moving so fast that I had a few general managers say to me this week, how did you guys get that info? I haven't even had a chance to tell my owner yet that we've completed the trade. So just goes to show you 2026, it comes at you fast.